very warm welcome to all the participants. It is indeed a pleasure to host you today for a panel on next generation telecom as an accelerator for enterprises. We are all aware connectivity has played a very major role in digital transformation and providing collaboration opportunities to businesses all across the world. With increasing emphasis on newer technologies, we believe enterprises have a larger role to play, and achieving a connected enterprise involves driving decisions and actions that bring people, process, and technology all together, and growing digital adoption amongst businesses and consumers to setting new bars for telecom network users and ecosystem enablers. So this panel essentially will discuss opportunities, trends, and barriers for further digital transformation initiatives and how will it impact enterprises. For the panel today, we'd like to welcome Mr. Bharat Bhatia from ITU. We also have Mr. Ashutosh Vasant, who's a director with RailTel. We have Mr. Rahul Vats, who's heading the regulatory at Airtel. We have Mr. Amit Marva from Nokia, Mr. Sandeep Girotra from Sterlite Technologies, and Dr. Kochar, who's the Director General at COAI. A very warm welcome to all of you. I'll begin with a question for Mr. Bharat Bhatia. So, Mr. Bharat, with the advent of upcoming technologies such as AI, AR, VR, we hear a lot of these on IoT, on 5G in the market. The enterprise customers are also expected to transform. And so how is the telecom industry preparing for this next generation of transformation? And what all should they be doing in addition to what they are trying to do today?
Yeah, Rahul, thanks, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants. I have been working in this area of so-called enterprise networks or industrial networks, or the different names being used, private LTE, private 5G, and this has really become a major industry today around the world. And I was just about half an hour back in another panel discussion on the same private 5G networks spectrum. Now, if we look at India, we started our mobile journey from 2G, and then we skipped the 3G and jumped on to the 4G, and that's where we are today. And then from 4G, we will be slowly evolving into the 5G networks. And that evolution process, when we move from 4G to 5G, it's driven by a lot of new tools such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, cloud-based RAN, virtual RAN, and a number of new technologies are going to be driving this network evolution. But if we look at globally, the 5G use cases, or 5G's main reason is how it is moving into the industrial sector or the enterprise sector. It started with the US and Germany in some aspect, but I think now it has gone around the world. 5G networks and also to some extent LTE networks, they are nowadays increasingly being looked upon as an option to provide private localized network to meet the unique connectivity, latency, and reliability requirements of different sectors. I think it started with Mercedes-Benz in Germany when they set up a dedicated factory based on 5G. Today, I was talking to a team from ABB in Thailand, and they're coming up with 4 or 5 major use cases of how the robotics based on 5G networks from one of the major vendors around the world is taking shape and is going to power the industrial growth of Thailand that they are working on. Now, we are today almost in the middle of this COVID situation. Industries have been hit. The factories are wanting to revive. And I think this is where the 5G networks is going to be a big thing. 5G networks or even 4G LTE networks for enterprises is going to be a major future challenge for the telecom sector. And for this, several business models are being seen including the provision of dedicated spectrum, and many regulators around the world have done that. I'll just come to that. And emerging new business models where operators are using cloud native systems and network slicing to meet the needs of specific vertical markets, whether it is the port sector or it's the airports or the factories or even the housing market. All of these markets basically are looking at these three possible ways, whether using the network slicing or using a dedicated networks. Now, regulators started with the US and Germany. They have allocated dedicated spectrum in 3.7, 3.8 gigahertz, for example, for the Mercedes factories and other factories in Germany. US has allocated the CBRS spectrum in 3.6 gigahertz. Denmark has given dedicated spectrum in 2.3 gigahertz and 23 gigahertz for the private LTE networks. So, as we move away from traditional model of delivering connectivity, we have to look how this is going to impact the business model of the operators, of the vendor, and as well as the user themselves, because enterprises are looking at their own network, their own kind of a secure network where they can safely pass on very highly confidential documents which are carrying a lot of IP data. For example, a car under production, all the drawings of the car have to be passed through those machines, and they do not want that kind of a data to go out of their premises or out of their networks, even not passed through an external agency. So those are the kind of issues that we will have to deal with. But to summarize, the enterprise market for 4G and 5G is a booming market now around the world, and I think there is a lot of discussion going on. We expect the Indian government also to look at it. We have also made presentations to the Parliamentary Standing Committee on this, as well as to the TRAI and the DOT, and hopefully government will look at the spectrum allocations for enterprise 5G market. Thank you.
Okay. So just a follow-on question on this. So how do you see AI and IoT also playing an integral part in the whole transformation?
So as we see the networks evolving from 4G to 5G, and then from 5G, in fact, we are already talking about 6G, which is totally driven by the AI, machine learning, deep learning. MIMO is going to play a big role. And when we talk about the higher spectrum like 26 gigahertz, the different AI-driven MIMO networks, and there's a lot of work being done in the universities around the world on how the higher frequency bands or even terahertz frequency bands can basically be used, and they will entirely be based on the artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, cloud computing, edge computing. So those are the kind of technologies that will feed into the future of this enterprise market, because the amount of data that needs to go in nanoseconds is going to be huge, and it can't really be done on these lower frequencies. So we are talking of much higher frequencies, and those to manage those MIMOs, AI and ML are really very critical. Thank you.
Absolutely, Bharat. So tremendous amount of information being exchanged at very low latency, and to sift through all that information, it is just not humanly possible. It's absolutely right. A fair bit of that. So I'll go to Dr. Kocher there. Dr. Kocher, with all these technologies coming in, very basic requirement then comes in: do we have the skills in people, or do we have enough skilled people to cater to these requirements? Because with the kind of explosion that Bharat talked about, with the amount of transformation that is happening, so how do you envisage, because we have been in a similar role earlier as the head of Telecom Skill Sector Council, so what is the importance of developing in-house and local Indian talent for such newer opportunities, both in India and globally, and what are the key skills that you believe the workforce will need to focus on going forward, and how well are we placed currently?
Thank you. This is a good question, and it is important that we look at it from the point of view that whatever technology may come in, unless we have the requisitely trained skinware, we are not going to draw maximum benefit out of it. right? As we go into these newer technologies, we see that AI will be taking over many of the jobs that are today being done by routine skilled labor, skilled technicians, skilled engineers. So these people will have to undergo a metamorphical change. They will either have to reskill or upskill, and both of them will go simultaneously. The requirement of skills will actually come from the industry. It cannot be a standalone requirement where we do a bookish sort of a thing and say that we are going to skill people into this and industry. You pick up people from whatever we have and then use them to the best possible way you can. That will not work. In these things, in the new technology environment that is going to prevail, industry has to sit hand in glove with the skilling ecosystem and decide what type of skills do you want and how many people you'll have to give out projections on that. Having said that, it is important that the requirement of people in the skilled workforce will shift from the oft-repeated skills, oft-repeated type of work. It will go into areas which are data-centric. It will go into areas which are cognitive, and it will go into flexible areas where multiple skills will be required simultaneously, and there is no gainsaying that only the human mind at this point of time can look at those skills. Anything which can be automated will eventually get automated. So the people will have to move out from their areas of comfort into areas where their mind is going to be used, and it is going to be used flexibly. This is the emerging scenario, and this is something where India should take advantage. We have a very fertile and a very flexible mind. We are very good learners, and we adapt to systems very fast. So rather than getting these type of skills come to us from the West, where also they are non-existent today, we should take the initiative, and we should skill people from here and actually start exporting the skilled manpower or services into the rest of the world. This is my viewpoint on the skills.
Absolutely right, Dr. Kochar. Would that also mean that there has to be a proactive feedback from the industry also back to the education system in order to make sure that we get the kind of people from colleges to some extent, and obviously the industry can then take a further step in training them, rather than having to start from scratch every time a new technology comes in and our curriculum isn't updated to that extent?
So Rahul, I would answer it in a different manner. Of course, a very simplistic answer is that industry and academics have to go hand in glove, and much more now than they ever did earlier. But that is not the whole answer. The whole answer would be that if you look at the type of workforce that is going to emerge, it can clearly be divided into three parts. One, at the lowest end, are the artisans who need not have any knowledge about what they're doing. They just know what is to be done, and they do that job under supervision. So that is the type of skills we are now propagating in India. That's not going to take us too far. The second type of skills is 60 to 70% is hands-on skills, and balance is knowledge. So these are the people who will form the bulwark of the skilled manpower. These are the people who will come out from colleges rather than being school dropouts. These are the people we have to plan for. Right? And then a small number will be at the third stage, which encompasses about 70 to 80% of knowledge and 20% of skills. Now, these are the scholars, the researchers, the scholars. These people today are very happy with academic fervor, and they know nothing about what is happening in the practical world. Now that has to merge. So it has to become a balanced ecosystem of skilled manpower. And this balance will come only if the industry proactively predicts and interacts with academic institutions. And the academic institutions get off their high horse and take industry seriously. Right? And the government sees that this catalysis happens. Then only we will get the type of manpower. Otherwise it will remain just sloganeering and nothing more.
Absolutely. Very, very wonderful perspective. I'll move to Amit. So Amit, you've been supporting telcos all throughout, and from your organization. So Could you just let us know what is it that the TSPs are currently doing to transform themselves and be transformation ready? So while they are building ecosystem partners and you have been supporting them, what exactly is happening on that space?
Yeah, so before I go into it, and thanks for the question, Rahul. There was a Bell Lab study that Nokia came out only a few months back during this pandemic time, and it was actually highlighting the benefits of 5G in enabling digitalization and how this pandemic has actually accelerated that to happen. One of the things that came out in the study was in the IT digitalization started in 2020, and in 10 years it has reached a level of about 75%. IT infrastructure companies today are digital. In telecom, we are starting that journey in 2020, and it's predicted that we will probably reach that same level by 2035. But having said that, what I'm trying to say is that there is a huge opportunity available with the CSPs of today to take this journey from becoming a CSP to a digital service provider. And that is the opportunity available. Now, to your question, with this huge opportunity, obviously there are huge challenges. And the challenges, in my opinion, can be classified into very, very categorically 4 main challenges. One is scope, scale, cost, and complexity. So these are important things that need to be dealt with today by the CSPs in order to take this journey. Now, whether we have technology today to be able to address these challenges and mitigate them, the answer is yes. And 5G actually provides that enabler, augmented with newer technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtualization, etc., that all these challenges can be mitigated and it can enable the CSPs to take this journey forward. Are the CSPs there? Partially, yes. I think the journey has started. I can tell you from my own experience that in India, if you look at the CSPs today, all of them in virtualization, they are at par or ahead of any other country in the world. So we have already started that journey. Similarly, in movement towards 5G and upgrading their networks towards making it 5G ready, I think this journey has already started. The other important aspect for the operators or the CSP to take this journey is to become a digital service provider, you need a partner ecosystem. So which is not the way that conventional business has been run so far. So you need a huge partner ecosystem which includes enterprises, which includes startups, which include government, which includes vendors like us, which includes everybody in the value chain in order to create value. Has that started? I would say to some extent, but still a long way to go in creating that ecosystem which can take them to a digital service provider. So in short, I can say the operators in India today are using innovation. They're the most innovative in the world. I can be very, very, I'm sure about that. They are looking at new revenue streams and they are looking at creating efficiency in the network all the time. That is the beauty about operators in India. Always in the last 25 years, I think we have been at the forefront in creating efficiency. And I think we are on the path, yes.
Absolutely wonderful perspective on the role of a digital telco that you clearly articulated. That operators essentially want to move beyond pure play connectivity into a larger play for themselves as well, and it's the right path forward. Now, with this, I'd now move to Rahul. Specifically, Rahul. Again, this was something that I plan to ask you later. But then, from what Amit said, so now again a question to you: how can telcos play a role in the digital journey of an organization beyond connectivity? And while Amit did mention some use cases, what specifically are organization like yours doing, and what can be done further to increase the pace of such initiatives?
Okay, thank you, Rahul, for this opportunity, and thank you, Communications Today, for this seminar. So let me start by saying that telcos already are, besides being a connectivity provider, we are having all the capabilities to offer end-to-end digital services encompassing all the needs of the customers. We are at a cusp, which Amit talked about briefly, at a cusp of transforming ourselves to be a full-fledged digital service providers. And we are evolving with innovative solutions which are coming from the digital field. We are partnering with various vendors and system integrators and cloud service providers. Pandemic has, this COVID-19 has, actually accelerated this journey largely. Because being locked up in your homes and offices, particularly the enterprises and businesses are feeling an intense need to be able to connect with their customers whom they normally were not able to, whom they generally the customer was coming to them. Let me give you a sharp example recently. We have got one of our customers who is actually a large jewelry retail chain across India, and they sell around 300 crores of jewelry per month, right? And so we were their actually connectivity providers for a long time. We were giving them bandwidth. But now, because of the pandemic, we actually entered into an agreement with them for providing cloud-based services to them so that they can facilitate and showcase their products through videos and instant messaging. And this has actually now transformed so much that they had of around 20,000 views coming out in a single day, right? So that is the power of the digital space, which is now increasingly coming. Let me extend that to what other solutions are there in digital space already. So we already have solutions on payment banks, on wallets, which are there, and a lot of them are under IoT stack. You briefly mentioned on that when you started. And this IoT stack is providing an integrated solution to, we are giving it as a solution to a lot of leading payment wallet providers in India, right? In partnership, we also have our own wallet, but we are also helping out other wallet providers to be able to get the same sort of customer experience, in giving their services. Similarly, in automobile sector, we have recently enabled a car manufacturer who is offering more than 60,000 connected car features, with access to real-time infotainment and telematics. Same holds true for fleet management. You are aware of the partnership we recently had with the government on the oxygen concentrators, which are going all across the country, and the demand and how we are able to track that with the help of a lot of partners which are already there. Lastly, let me mention one last thing. You are aware of our partnership with AWS, and along with them, we are able to actually access hundreds and billions actually, of records and see, how we get a more insightful view into the business using the analytical tools. So I think we are really, already into a digital space and digital intelligence, so as to say, to be able to do this. Now, to be able to hasten this journey, I think we require some interventions coming from the government, particularly on ease of doing business, which I'm sure the government is already working on. So I would say that at the end of it, we already are in digital space. Pandemic is accelerating that space, and if things go as planned, I think we are going to see a transformation much ahead of time as would have happened otherwise.
No. Having said that, even the blue jeans in India is, I think, a product which is catered to by Airtel specifically, right?
That's right.
Now, I'll then move to, now we talked on the telco side. Now, I think it's also very important to focus and discuss things on the infrastructure side. And since we have Sandeep from STL, so Sandeep, you're aware, as per the National Broadband Mission, there's a very ambitious target to take fiber connectivity to all rural parts of the hinterland and deploy over maybe 10 lakh mobile towers and have over fiber connectivity to maybe 50 lakh route kilometers overall. Now, from that perspective, we are also looking at maybe an ambitious target of over 70% fiberization in the next 3 to 4 years or so. So how, according to you, is this target achievable, and what are the challenges with regard to achieving this?
Yeah, so thanks for that question, and hi everyone, to all the panelists here, and thank you Communication Today as well. So, the question which you asked, that the number of towers going up, 70% of the towers to be fiberized or even more eventually as we go deeper and deeper into the 5G penetration. At the same time, the 5G without a very robust high capacity front haul and back haul does limit its opportunity. So when we look at what is the opportunities or the 50 lakh route kilometer which you referred to, so I will divide it into 3 parts. One is that why it is possible, and I absolutely do, and I will say that's the money part. The second is a little bit on the challenge side, which is the process part, and the third category, which is that all of this infrastructure is basically some piece of hardware and software unless the users have the ability to access it. So third category, I'll put it as users. So money, process, and users. So when we look at the money part, the government is putting in a lot of money, and this is the government in India. And if you just go around the world, and STL now is a very large global setup. If you look at the governments or the large operators world over, whether it is India or UK or Germany or Spain or the RDOF in the US, they're all putting huge amounts of money behind the fiber penetration to the last remote corners of their respective geographies. So there's government money coming in, and there is heavy government support behind these areas. Then you start to look at the private players also have a significant amount of interest to capture that value which comes from these users and the enterprises which are deep down into the heartland of the country. So there is an interest from that side. Third, you start to look at private equity. The amount of money they are pumping in into fiber optic assets or shared assets in general is quite large. And then, of course, we have the Universal Service Obligation Fund. So when we look at this, that can it be done? Will it be done? The answer is absolutely yes. The second part, then it comes to process. How quickly can we do it? And this is the reason I bring this forward is simply to say the digital divide, the so-called digital divide, is not a constant thing. So a digital divide of today, and if we are slow, the digital divide will still stay there, but will move to a different category. Whether we are able to provide the same set of services which we can provide to a highly dense, relatively well-to-do urban area, will we provide the same, be able to provide the same services to the rural areas? So the digital divide has a tendency to shift. So therefore, speed of getting all the consumers and all the citizens at the same level of performance, at the same level of access is very critical. And what defines, so this is the process part. So what defines the speed for us in STL, for example, is that how quickly can we get topics like rights of way, etc. sorted out. And Rahul briefly alluded to that governments are doing a lot of work. But it is still a journey which needs to be traveled. It's highly localized. It's highly fragmented. Every entity, every state has a different mechanism and a process, etc., etc. So those are the kind of things which the process needs to come together very quickly. The third part which I refer to is the users. All of this is practically useless unless the users are able to use it eventually. And I'll just use a single line. One of my customers a long time ago used to tell me when they were trying to bring in their fixed and mobile network together. He said, the zipper always goes from bottom to the top, right? So then it comes to the users, whether it is the village, people in the village, in the Gram Panchayat, or wherever they are. So, we can set all of this infrastructure up. It's going to be of use only if there are devices which are affordable in that segment. This will be usable only if there are end user machines, laptops or similar, which are affordable, and that segment is able to get access to that, whether it is by way of their own procurement or by way of some kind of government plans. The third part also is the internet and a bit of technical or technology literacy. I'm just picking up the point which General Kochhar mentioned a few minutes ago, that while we need all of those professors moving into the application areas and we need brains and all of that, but here we need to get the people to become comfortable with technical literacy. And it's not about learning to program, it's about getting the fear of the device away from them. Yeah. Those are some of the things. And the final thing is that then more and more, as we start to nail all of this down, more and more government and other kind of services can be pushed down this network, which has a multiplier effect on the speed. And it's at that point when the power of this whole ecosystem starts to get to the user. So that's where I will summarize. Long answer to your short question, but 3 points. The money is there, processes need to be helped, and end user has to be kept in mind all the time for this to have an effect.
Very, very aptly put, Sandeep, because that will ultimately be a concern. Even if you have the network, you have the connectivity, and if there are no users, or if the users who are still suboptimal users will still not meet the desired targets that we have set out for ourselves. Because digitization just doesn't mean having access. It also means people to have access to some applications that they can actually fruitfully use in their daily life, and that's where the true power of connectivity comes to the fore. Absolutely, very rightly put. Thank you, Sandeep. So I'll move to Ashutosh now. So Ashutosh has again as one of the leading fiber infrastructure players in the country. From your perspective, you're also a large enterprise by yourself. What are the additional use cases that you can envisage going forward?
Hi, Rahul, and namaskar to all the panelists. Thank you for keeping me at the end. It makes my job easier. You know why? I want all your ears locked to what I'm going to tell you, because this is going to, in a nutshell, solve all the problems or the bottom lines or the essentials having been spoken about by all the panelists. Rahul, when we say a lot of inputs from the government, we forget it is your and my taxpayers' money. It is our Form 16 speaking for the government. Where does the money from government come in? It is your and my money that gets flowed in. So why not solve the problem in a way that the investments that are required to really bring about a change in the country are flowed where they are going to make an impact? Mind my words, why I'm saying this. See, each one of these applications, or the high capacity, low latency, IoT, industrialization and efficiency increase that we speak about, requires very resilient, always available connectivity. This is the missing piece today. When you talk to the biggest operator in the country, do you know what they claim? They say, I have a 5-cut not out network. What does it mean? You could have done something with 1x investment, but you have been made to invest 5x in order to deliver the expected services. You are getting me? If I can give you the same resilience in 1x, the amount of money or the capex that you have flowed in to build roads when you buy a car, mark my words, when you go and buy a car, you don't intend making roads. You intend paying the road tax and believe that there would be a road available. If you want premium roads, you would pay toll tax. But you don't intend going out and carpeting roads to drive your car.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Now mark my words. Using the existing investments already in place, if you can assign a business acumen sharp leadership to integrate the available assets, you have a solution in place. I would solve the puzzle now. Operator like RailTel, exclusive right of way over 64,000 kilometers of rail track. I have a right of way where my resilience of my fiber network is one of the best as compared to those who run along roads, because along roads, the number of cuts per 1,000 kilometers per month is 15. This is the Indian average. 15 cuts per 1,000 kilometers per month. What it means is you have to flow so many times more resources to keep your networks up. You are getting me? Now, RailTel has an exclusive right of way 64,000 kilometers fiber network. PGCIL has OPGW another 50-60,000 kilometers of fiber network. You have oil companies, gas companies like ONGC, Oil India, GAIL who have fiber networks along their pipelines. Then you have all these state power distribution companies who are replacing their earth wire by OPGW, which again has fiber. Then I started RailTel from Gujarat as a founding member, so I know GSPC, GNFC, GIPL have fiber along their track, along their gas pipelines. They are all lying as separate jigsaw puzzles. If you hand them over to me and I integrate them, Rahul, wherever there is electricity, there is a high tension power line. Wherever there is population, there is a railway line. Wherever you have industries, you have a gas line. You are having a backbone, a resilient, high capacity backbone by stitching all these fiber networks together, solving the puzzle for the country. Then all the operators who are there to make money, see, please understand, it is finally money which drives business. Everything has to be self-sustainable. Otherwise, you are into a parasitic economy where you keep expecting somebody else to pay you money to serve. 5G is going to ask you for huge cost of deployment. If your services cost is so high, it doesn't make techno-economical sense. Nobody is going to buy it. I'm going to solve your problem by creating a resilient, high-capacity, faceless transportation network. Why do I say faceless? Create huge amount of capacity on this jig network which crisscrosses the country from northeast to the south, to the west, to the east, across the country, just by integrating the exclusive right of way high availability fiber networks. Create huge capacity, produce an app from which any of these players can generate capacity from any of the POP from northeast to down south to east to west, just on an app by online payment. You need not see anybody's face, and then build beyond that to reach wherever you want to. Where if you are able, if we in the panel together can drive this to make it happen, the Honorable PM's vision of connecting 6 lakh villages in 1000 days can be crushed to 500 days. And then with that kind of population coming on the connected platform, each of the operators on the panel would have enough business to drive sustainably the investments that are required to take this to every nook and corner of the country. I hope you get me. If we can together drive this, we have solved the country's problem. You require a ubiquitous, high capacity, high resilient, something like sunlight, air, water availability network, which I call as Mishti Dohi, THOI, the Digital Highway of India. Time to do this. Time no longer to have any further discussions, Rahul. Time to hammer and drill this down. If we can do this, we will change this country. I hope all the panelists would agree with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasant. That's a very different way of thinking and a very model that can be thought of. So I'll extend that question again to Sandeep. So Sandeep, obviously what Vasant did mention does make sense in light of the wastages that we have currently. But going further beyond that, would infrastructure sharing, including lit fiber, also be a possible solution for current fiberization challenges that the country faces, both in terms of enhancing or increasing redundancy and coverage? And in your way, what could be the possible pros and cons for such kind of a solution?
So let me just first acknowledge the question here that yes, absolutely. The headline answer to your question is yes. But I just want to go back to what Vasant said and comment on it. So I absolutely agree with you, Vasant, that there is a plenty of mission critical, highly reliable fiber running across the length and breadth of the country, sitting in different pockets, as you said, partly with RailTel, partly with Oil India, partly with PGCIL, etc., etc., etc. And then if you were to bring that fiber up and increase the capacities or do something different, the right of way sits right with you. So it's when it comes to the process part of the question, I think this is a massive asset which we have sitting there, and then technologies like OPGW, etc. They all add up. So I think that's a very powerful statement and a very powerful plea which you make here, Vasant, about that how we could crash this time down. So bringing this to now the sharing. So what Vasant said is essentially a lot around the sharing piece itself. Now, as far as sharing is concerned, I've been in the telco business for a very long time. So if I was to just divide it into following portions, that if you were to look at early 2000s, having a tower in a particular area was a competitive advantage for at that time different operators. It was a competitive advantage that I have a tower and my competitor doesn't have, so I get there first, I get the subscribers first, etc., etc. Slowly it started to move towards a much more mature thinking, and again to the point of that this business is not about the business is about making money and having a competitive advantage which is sustainable. Having a tower at a new location is a competitive advantage, yes, but it is a competitive advantage for a certain period of time before the next guy comes in. So the competitive advantages need to come from what are you offering to your customers? What is the differentiation there? Is it sustainable, etc. So somewhere in the late 2010 thereabouts, the tower sharing started to happen, and India was in fact one of the first large markets which actually went into tower sharing with the scale which we did. Indus Towers is the one. So you look at sharing now, then you start to look at the optical fiber networks lately in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. The optical fiber networks are being set up by infracos, neutral hosts. and the people will ride on that network. And those examples are again diameters in Europe, in the US, starting to develop that in India as well. So this is still about passive infrastructure. And with the 5G, and combine that with the fiber network, I am absolutely convinced that the active sharing is the way forward. I mean, you can start to see the number of MVNOs which are starting to emerge again around the world. So active sharing is the way for the future, and the 5G technology does allow that active sharing with a logical separation of the network, not necessarily a physical separation of the network with slicing, for example. I'm just using that. So there is a lot going for sharing, active as well as passive, and a couple of things, and this is where I will kind of make my conclusion here. So if you start to look at the sharing, so what is it? What does it do? Economics is obvious, right? That it does reduce the capex and therefore the opex and therefore the competence and the skill requirement. So this kind of helps the whole chain to be much more efficient. Let's not forget the environment and the aesthetics. How many times do you want to dig the same road to lay the fiber from an operator A and operator B? How much fuel you are burning, how much manpower you are using, how much money you are wasting, what are you doing to the skyline of the city with the multiple towers, etc. Then you start to look at the speed of access you can provide to the remote areas, because suddenly the business case is now looking a lot better to go to remote areas because there is somebody else who is sharing the cost with you. So I think the big topic around this, which as an industry we need to get our head around to, is that how do we start to standardize and put some clear processes around it. But back to your question and sort of summarizing it, absolutely passive active sharing is the way forward. It is being actively encouraged around the world, and there is all the reasons for us to promote it, encourage it, even by regulation, but certainly by processes.
Absolutely, Sandeep. I agree to the fact that sharing is the way to go. And with the amount of MVNOs and obviously virtualization as well there, I have seen use cases where some companies have come with a solution of operate in a box, which they can essentially launch in as less than about 6 weeks or so. Obviously, if the same thing could be taken to fiber also, both in terms of standardization and overall sharing, you're right, it will open up a lot more use cases which were earlier non-profitable and suddenly become profitable because someone is sharing these costs.
Spot on. I think I didn't want to advertise a few companies which do that in a box. 6 weeks is a long time. They do it faster.
Yeah, actually, there are some definitely there. So I agree with you. So I'll from that, thank you, Sandeep. There, I'll move to Dr. Kocher here. So Dr. Kocher, according to you, what do you believe are some of the use cases which will have near impact, which is sooner in time? From the next gen solutions like on IoT across industries like agriculture, real estate, manufacturing, and the likes. And combining that question is what is the kind of perceived economic impact and the growth that you see from an India perspective?
Yeah. So Rahul, industries you have already mentioned yourself, which are seeing us in the eye. Agriculture is one, medicine is another, academics is one which is we are seeing now happening. Why is it that connecting them together will bring us benefits has been very clearly brought out on the sidelines by Ashutosh when he says sharing. And I would look at it in a reverse engineering point of view. You are aggregating disjointed small pieces of excellence into one large mass. So it gives you the economies of scale. It gives you a lot of comfort that what you are propagating actually meets the standards and actually is uniform across the length and breadth of the country. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then some places you will get very good returns. Some places you will get nothing. In other places you will get very good standards. In metros, you'll get good doctors. In rural areas, you will not. But if you aggregate this entire thing, then you are distributing everything across the country, which will bring a lot of benefit, right? And with 5G coming in, even the dangers which Bharat mentioned in the beginning of secrecy of enterprises will go away. Network slicing, edge computing actually give you a private network without actually being a physically private network. And therefore, I would say let people who are best at doing what they're doing do that, and let others work in their own expertise, rather than everyone delving into everything else, right? So this is something which will bring a lot of benefit to the country, definitely. And immediately which is emerging are our scattered holdings in agriculture, with farmers having 1 or 2 acres per family. They are not getting even a small livelihood for themselves. But if you aggregate that, and then you bring all the ancillaries through AI, like marketing, etc., then you get the benefit of technology for the people who are participating in this. Without technology, also we've seen an example of this in Anand, when Amul came up. They did it without technology, but they reaped huge benefits. We have the advantage of technology now, we have the advantage of AI now. And if you put that together, the benefits will be manifold.
Absolutely. So taking to a point that it is the collective bargaining power that the applications will have once technology is leveraged, and in a combination of policy measures, it will reap huge benefits for the country overall. And even in a seemingly, non-technology based sector like agriculture, you can reap huge dividends there. So thank you, Dr. Kocher. I move to Amit. So Amit, in terms of what do you believe, what role does capital and infrastructural developments play for the connecting the next billion people, and what would be the likely applications and which would enable that, and where do you believe we are on that journey currently?
Thanks, Rahul. So I would say capital infrastructure, very, very valid, needs to be built. What is required to be done in order to create a capital infrastructure or to grow this infrastructure, I would divide it into a couple of steps. One is you need what we call the digital infrastructure, and we need on top of that the physical infrastructure, and over and above that you need to build what Mr. Kocher already, General Kocher said, the technology and the training and the competence of the people in order to run it. Physical infrastructure, in my view, is partly a responsibility of the government, because even roads are important in order to get the logistic, running properly, in the customs running properly, and all those things happening. Physical infrastructure also includes partly industry, partly government. Getting, as we said, fiber through sharing or whatever way, more and more into the country. Physical infrastructure also to some extent means providing the real estate by the government, which is the spectrum, for running networks of the future. And it also requires future technologies such as, for instance, E and V band, which will then help to enhance the network, and the dependence on fiber to some extent get leveraged. So these are all the building blocks that we need today in order to create the capital, or what is the capital required in order to build the infrastructure. And on top of this, then comes the digital infrastructure, which, as we mentioned, is coming together and transforming into a journey with virtualization, artificial intelligence, whatever we can do in order to create, and as Sandeep said, the use cases which benefit the end user in terms of where 5G as a technology or any future technology, forget 5G, any future transformation towards digitalization can take this country to the next level. Use cases, I would say low hanging, fixed wireless can be done very easily. It's something which will help to connect rural connectivity, even something which we can and we should do today. Going forward, I would say the use cases can be divided into two categories. One I call what is called physical leading industries and the other is physical lagging industries. Physical leading industries are industries which are ready right now. For instance, manufacturing, logistics, infrastructure is there, and very quickly with IoT or with all these technology upgrades, you can move them into digitalization. And then lagging industries are like agriculture or even education in India, or mining, for instance, which will take a little bit more time in order to build towards that journey. So the leading industry, which is Industry 4.0, which is the technologies which are available with the infrastructure which is existing today, and upgrading that would be the low-hanging fruit use cases. And of course, it will lead to more advanced use cases in the lagging industry as we go.
Thank you. So I will. What I'll do is now again back to Bharat. So Bharat, again coming from an organization which defines the basic core of standards. So how do you believe the other use cases could be to connect the next billion, and how do you expect standards to be liberalized or or kind of made available going forward? Bharat?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Bharat, you're audible.
I was muted. So let me start with a little bit of R&D, because that's what leads into standards.
Yes.
If many of you may recall, CDOT that was set up in mid-80s was the first real R&D work in telecom that happened. But again, it kind of tapered off in 90s, and then the whole telecom evolution took place. But I think with the 5G coming in, we have started to come back into the R&D area. There is work going on. At least many of you would have heard about this 5G technology standard that started in IIT Chennai and with other IITs participating. A lot of you would have heard about LMLC. This is low mobility large cell. This is what is going to meet the ubiquitous requirements of connectivity by providing a single base station which provide almost like a double coverage area, so reduce the cost of investment, etc. So that started off India on a new journey of R&D and standards. So first time, if you would see in the ITU where I mostly work, India's homegrown 5G standard has been approved as one of the global standards, and the other, of course, 3GPP, which is a common standard, and still the Chinese standard, which was also in race, could not get the approval. It is still going through the process. And then we have another standard from Europe, the ETSI standard, which also couldn't get approved, for which a second chance has now been given. But today we can say that yes, we are on the R&D front and on the standardization front. But as we move from 5G into 6G, I think this is time for us to really start working on the R&D and standardization. That's an area that has been lagging. Lot of work is happening around the universities in the world, and in the ITU we have already started work on defining the next standard, the 6G standard, to be called perhaps IMT 2030. And that standard work we need to get our R&D institution or our academics of the universities to get fully actively involved in. And I think that's an area where my association, the ITU Foundation of India, and the WWRF, World Wireless Research Forum, is very actively involved in. So that's one. And just let me add one more on this connectivity, connecting the next billion and people who are unconnected today. And I think Ashutosh ji has talked a good point of integrating all the fiber, and Sandeep talked about that. But I think the third dimension to that is also using a higher altitude things like LEO satellites, for example. You would have heard about OneWeb, what they are doing, or CubeSats. And also the new thing that's coming is high altitude based cellular base stations, known as HIPS. So HIPS and LEOs and CubeSats, etc., are going to be another area connecting the places where today are unconnected, and they are going to provide the ubiquitous connectivity of the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm coming back to Ashutosh. Ashutosh, your hand was up. just thought of combining a question for you. So Ashutosh, are there any global learnings from other countries who are deploying fiber assets and deploying newer technologies and creating larger ecosystems that India can probably emulate? And what are the leading practices that one should look forward to? And obviously, this is something that, while many people talk about, what do you think is realistically possible?
Rahul, pardon me for sounding immodest. I strongly believe, why should we look at outside? We should be the leaders and set role models for others to follow. And now let me blow in something which would excite the telecom industry to see more value. See, today we always talk about all our policies which are restricted to 20% of the people who are vocal on the social media or so-called elite who have access to internet. You can be seeing this very openly in the fastest finger first for the COVID registration today. Even the best connected are not able to get access. So all your policies are restricted to 20% of the people who have the liberty or the access to internet, good quality, who can speak in forums, tweet, come on social media and speak their mind. What about the rest? We treat them just like numbers. Now to excite investments in the next gen, let me show you something else. Give me 2 minutes. Imagine if I make Indian Railways the Amazon of transportation. You know what I mean? The same idea of digital highway for India by integrating all transport mechanisms. I am now talking about Indian Railways as the collector of all kinds of carriage of anything from anywhere to anywhere in decided transit time. This is impossible to imagine today, Rahul. If you get transferred, you would prefer Agarwal movers and packers, which is the first thing which comes in your mind. You would never think of transporting your valuable goods by railways. Whereas railways is one of the cheapest, exact guaranteed transit time, and one of the safest. But you don't, because there is a missing piece of customer connect. Now imagine if I can integrate railways, last mile at both ends by the local entrepreneur who wants to put a truck, and local movers and packers. Now imagine a farmer sitting in Shivpuri wanting to sell his onions. Locally he is getting 2 rupees per kg, but if he is getting in Delhi 70 rupees per kg or 40 rupees per kg, and on an app he can book, I don't even want to load them to the nearest station, but somebody has to come to my farm, cut them for me, pack them for me, give me insurance, ensure that it is delivered the third day, ensure that I get a return receipt. Imagine what level I am taking the business in India to. Are you getting me? I have 7,000 stations across the country, but I am talking about developing an ecosystem where the local entrepreneur who today looks for a job and runs to a metro no longer runs out, but becomes a part of the ecosystem through an IT platform where telecom plays a major role. If your all villages are well connected, who stops somebody from putting up an industry in you may say where? Lunawada. Why does he want to come and look for a big place? Because he doesn't see a market for his produce. But if I can reduce the per ton 1,000 kilometer cost of transportation to the lowest in the world, place would no longer matter. If I can ensure that your produce, whether it is farm produce, industry produce, your services, your ideation or anything across the nooks and corners of the country can be transported just by booking through an app, you have solved the puzzle for the country. You are going to solve even the next third, fourth, fifth waves of not just COVID but many pandemics, because you would solve the problem of migrant labor. No longer the people have to rush to metros for jobs, because you would be spreading the entrepreneurship to the nooks and corners of the country, because you are solving the problem of connectivity, you are solving the problem of transportation, you are reducing the cost of reaching to the market. Imagine if you can do something like this, we are disrupting the economy, and we would be then counted, others would follow us, we need not follow them.
True.
And this is doable, and this is very much doable now.
True. It's said that typically population follows employment, and ultimately if what you're saying is employment through advancements in technology, can be made distributed
Rahul,
rather than.
Yes, Rahul, sorry, I would just take a step forward. In fact, I have been driving an idea that instead of we talking about government flowing money, let's reverse the trend. You have 350 CPSUs in the country. I am one of them. 174 of them are consistently profitable. 33 are constantly draining the country. If I just ask the CMD and functional directors of the top 100 CPSUs to pick up their bags from metros and move to one new green smart city, I'm talking about green, no brown, no existing, absolutely raw, I would be automatically creating development across the nooks and corners of the country. Do you know why? If I ask Coal India CMD to shift from Calcutta to Atal Nagar, which is the new capital for Chhattisgarh, all their vendor partner ecosystem who do business with them, the tire companies who have 5,000 crore business every year, you would not have to push them to Atal Nagar. They would be all sitting there for business. The top consultants would be moving to that place because they give them consultancy. And I'm not talking about one. I'm just talking about 5 guys to be deserved. The top guys who have done their thing, it is time for them to contribute back to the economy. Just shift them, pick them up and ask, start working from a new raw smart city from tomorrow morning and see what I make the country do. Because as they move in, they invest, retail, education, entertainment, connectivity, services, everything would grow in that nook and corner of the country because there is somebody now to pay for it. Are you getting me? Once I do that, I create employment, I create opportunity for telecom, I create opportunity for every industry in the country. Time to disrupt. Rahul, time to think beyond what we have been discussing. These 3 ideas, if you allow me to do, you would have a different country tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashutosh. So I'll move to Rahul, and Rahul, this is I think one question that you're most passionate about, and you would have been representing various organizations time and again on this. So now, question, the twist is, how important or prudent is it for, or do you think is the role of enterprises in building use cases of 5G? And how do you think it'll ultimately impact the spectrum pricing and its usage going forward?
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. I just want to spend 30 seconds on the discussion on the standards, which had taken place earlier. So while as an Indian telco who is completely entrenched, we definitely want that we have standards which are there for us. However, I think let us not I just want to sound a caution. We should not get into this technology thing where we lag. There was a NTSC PAL fight of 70s, 80s in broadcasting. We are aware of the GSMA, CDMA and what happened after that. And the Chinese model of having a separate technology standard, while 4G was introduced. We have seen the demise of all these technologies one by one. We don't want to be left behind. Today in 5G, if I see, is there any country in the world who is wanting a separate standard? Is China having a separate standard? Answer is no. Right? We are now talking about 6G. Please take a lead in 6G. Let's try to start doing it right now. Take a lead, go ahead. But let's not try to restrict our 5G that we start lagging behind. Already we are 2 years late, from where we should have been on 5G. So I think we have to be very, very cautious on this, discussion on standards that it should not lead to a problem where I am isolated. Technically, imagine, Rahul, you going out to any other country and not being able to, connect to your home base, right? That's the last thing you want. So that's just one word of thing which I want to talk about. Now, coming back to the question which you currently asked, till now, generally the solutions and services of the enterprises have been network driven, right? So what a telco's network can offer, businesses are adopting the solutions accordingly. However, with 5G, the underlying network architecture of telco would go for a paradigm shift. General Kocher mentioned about the virtualization which is going to happen and how the networks and its characteristics are going to go for a large change now. So in 5G, due to low latency and ultra high speed, effectively what will happen is it will allow the businesses to create a very beautiful cocktail of cloud, mobility, enterprise solutions, and imagine, the impact on manufacturing and automobiles and health. So we are basically looking for a huge digital transformation, which awaits us. And the use cases of 5G will be driven by, adoption of various technologies. For manufacturing, for example, which we are currently seeing, I think Bharat mentioned at the beginning about Mercedes, trying out robotics, AI and IoT, happening. A lot of things happening on healthcare, and we know the current situation we are in. And you really think that had we gone on this journey of 5G, could we have been little better in terms of our capabilities for monitoring today? I don't know, right? But we could have definitely have a much more grip on a real-time imaging and real-time solutions which were possible. Similarly, in entertainment and gaming sector, I mean, everybody is aware of what strides we are taking. No, but this entire journey is intrinsically linked up to the spectrum cost. Currently, our spectrum costs are really, what should I say? We are like something like, if I remember correctly, around 60 times of German price per spectrum. Right, that's where we are standing today. So if that is what I'm going to fight, I'm really, there's a classical example, and Sandeep is there and Amita are there. So we used to go to China and find out, what are they doing and what is the capex when we were doing the 4G rollouts, right? And they used to tell us that they have spent around 80% of their money on capex in terms of rolling out, and around 20% of the money on buying the spectrum, right? That was in 4G. In 5G, it's literally nothing for spectrum. In India, we were reverse. We were spending out 80% of money on buying spectrum, and just 20% money was left for us to do a rollout on actual ground. So I think that disparity needs to undergo a change, because otherwise we are chasing a wrong dream. If I just end up buying spectrum and not actually rolling it out, a lot of the deals which we are having and we are discussing are never going to, actually, happen. With 5G, we know the things which are otherwise required. Deep is there, and Ashutosh have talked about. You require to have fiberization at a much higher space, and all ideas which Ashutosh has given, Sandeep has given. I think we need to adopt all of them now. We don't have the time now to debate what is right, what is wrong. I think the time is to just go ahead and start implementing, and I think that's where I would really want this to be, that the government has to now step up, and look at pricing of spectrum, look at how you enable the 5G ecosystem to develop. And I think with that happening, there will be a huge boost to the overall digital economy which we are thinking. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rahul. I think we are at the end of our 1 hour panel. Very, very diverse views and very informative views. And essentially, if I were to summarize it, essentially I would have 7 points or 6 or 7 points to summarize it. Essentially talking about the various models of what would work and what could work better. Having business cases that will enable the economy to grow and take advantage of the infrastructure that has already been built. Then from Dr. Kochhar coming about skills that are needed, and not only skills but also radical transformation the way our education system is working. And then again, an interesting point, infrastructure sharing as a driver for growth and profitability. And then coming to employment generation, technology as an enabler, and lastly not the least, spectrum and a liberalized spectrum regime with pricing which is critical to an operator's growth and sustenance. And that's all I could conclude with. Any passing remarks from General Kochhar, anything from your side?
Yeah, Rahul. All I would like to say is that I repeat what Ashutosh has been saying in a different context. We have to look at the emerging scenario with different eyes. Why we are not automated is because we are trying to automate the manual processes into digital format. Automation has failed. So similarly, now if we continue doing the same thing what we've been doing so far, including taxation, including regulation, including rollouts, including sharing, then we're not going to go anywhere substantive. But if we look at it out of box, and if we look at it from a different point of view and long term, then we will reach somewhere. Thank you.
With this, we come to the conclusion of our panel today. I believe the panel was as informative and useful for you as it has been for me. Thank you very much for being there. Thanks a lot.